Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the compatibility or lack of it between or with democracy and multiculturalism. Now, if we look at sort of democracy around the world and throughout history, where it has worked and survived, it's typically been, in fact, it's hard to find examples outside of this. It's been a very homogenous group of people, ethnically homogenous and behaviorally homogenous, who have had the confidence to share power with their fellow citizens and with other groups within the society, as in middle class and so on. So this is where democracy has sort of where it started and how it did survive. And of course, we're talking in ancient terms, at least, ancient Greece, Rome, and so on. And it's modern Britain or England, and even then, it was meaningful democracy didn't really appear until the late 1700s. Sort of, or maybe the mid 1700s, it began to seriously appear. But power sharing in various ways and so on was happening even before that. The British Parliament, for example, had more power, and that's sort of the lords and even the midweight type lords and aristocrats had more power within those societies than any group in Europe could have dreamed of at the time. And again, as I've mentioned in other videos, the settlers of the Americas, the early colonists in what was later to become the United States, they were some of the freest people in the world already, and the fact that they could go to war over the niceties of how much tax they should and shouldn't pay and things like that shows just how free they were to indulge those concerns to the extent that they did. This is when most of the people, certainly in Central and Eastern Europe, were still medieval serfs, just slaves on the land. So democracy has got but wherever we see it, we see that homogeneity is a key factor. And certainly in modern times, Christianity is a key factor. There was no place where democracy took root that wasn't also a Christian society. So these things are really interrelated. I can't think of any successful democracy really outside of that. Now, a couple of people have mentioned to me, well, what about India? No, I wouldn't call India a successful democracy, far from it. There's a small Brahmin ruling elite, and they have these corrupt bullshit farce of elections. It's a dirt poor basket case, corrupt country. It's so corrupt that you can't have a shit there without bribing somebody or needing to bribe somebody. And then someone else said, well, what about Japan? Again, Japan, a small ruling elite, and they've got sort of show elections. I guess they shouldn't be dismissed as being, not without some sort of credence. But the reality is that democracy, as much as it is a democracy, and I dispute that it is, but it was imposed on them by the Americans during the occupation following World War II, and it's not something that ever sat well with Japanese society and how that society is structured. So I can't think of anywhere in the world where democracy is, as in there are multiple political parties that have policies that they put forward and ask the voters to vote in a completely corruption-free, free and fair, accurate vote counting election. There's just not many of those around. Now, in the West, I don't think anyone would dispute that democracy is under huge assault in the West, and not from the people or from white supremacists, which is the absurd fantasy propaganda that the globalists and their two-bit flunkies push out. But the attack is from the against democracy is from the globalist controlled elites. And democracy, the idea that people have a say, it creates a level of uncertainty for the globalists and their stooges, and they just can't have that uncertainty. So I think they want to. My view is they can't get rid of democracy quick enough, and the quicker the better from their perspective. But nonetheless, let's have a look at how they're eroding it in a sort of, I suppose, a partially organic way. But multiculturalism is something that is really the death knell of democracy. Homogeneity is key. Now, once you have homogeneity of population and homogeneity of, say, religion, then you have, to a large extent, homogeneity of behaviour within a range. Now, people within that may have different ideas about how to solve society's problems and challenges, and but they all agree that those problems are the problems to be solved, but they may have different methods and ways of getting there to solve those problems. And that's fine. That's how you get different political parties with different policies and different policy prescriptions. So by swamping the West with a very aggressive migration scheme from people that are completely and utterly incompatible with Western values and Western attitudes and Western behavior, utterly incompatible. Then bringing them out, but also the multiculturalism angle, where these people are told, well, you don't have to integrate or assimilate. You can behave exactly as you did in that dirt poor basket case, violent country that you came from, or place that you came from, and that's okay. You create a ghetto over there, and you just go around murdering with machetes and throwing acid in people's face. You do all the things that you used to do over there in that lawless shithole you came from, and that's okay. That's all right. We're good to go on that, and we'll even give you white taxpayer dollars to help you along while you're doing it. Oh, hey, what a deal! We'll give you handouts galore. We will do everything to make you feel as if you never left your basket case shithole. So this multicultural thing is diametrically and directly opposed to the concept of democracy, which is shared power, shared values, shared responsibilities, shared liabilities, and so on. So multiculturalism disperses all that into the ether. And what these multicultural situations result in is what we see today: identity politics. And we see it as an example in Australia, that every little racial group has special pleading. They say they have special needs and a special case to get their snouts in the trough. So we have to have our own politicians. We can't have politicians that serve the common good. We want special considerations just for us, just for our racial group. But hey, you've left your country and you come to Australia, a white Western majority. Don't give a shit. You say multiculturalism is okay, and we want the fruits of that multiculturalism, which is handouts, responsibility, obligation-free handouts just for our group. So they want their own politicians. They want policies made and crafted specifically for their needs. They want laws passed at local and level in particular that allows them to put their own, home country language up in big letters on all the shops. They want special schools made just for their needs. They want special community halls and facilities. They want special translators. They want everything. They want it all laid on at white taxpayer expense, by the way. They want it all laid on. And so they have just a completely different country, if you like, running, within the white countries, in this case, Australia. And this could be Indians, it could be Chinese. Now, given the integration rate with the white population is in terms of, say, things like intermarriage, that sort of stuff, is very low, 2 or 3%. And that's even for people that are born here, for goodness sakes, from other races. So the Indians, large group of Chinese, a lot of other Asians, they want to keep, their situation genetically pure, And so they'll be arguing for their own tribe and their own needs 100 years from now, 200 years from now. And they won't see themselves as part of a community or part of one civis. So this identity politics is a direct path to the destruction of democracy in the sense of, again, shared values, shared responsibilities, shared care of one another, and so on. Now, the identity, you go back to a newspaper, this is pre-internet days, a newspaper, say, from the 1980s or even early 1990s for that matter, and outside of the US where you had the black identity politics thing, but outside of the US, you just don't see identity politics. It's rare. I mean, if you get, even in the left-leaning journals, they didn't beat the drum so heavily, anywhere near as heavily as they do today. And in the mainstream, you'd hardly ever see it. This idea of pushing identity politics and coming up with cases and examples of personal grievance from, Shaniqua was walking through the park and says that evil racist Hitlers, said this, did that. You just didn't see those sort of stories. I mean, clearly they're propaganda now, designed to create fault lines along, within race and gender and sexuality and all that sort of stuff. So it's obviously a propaganda play today, and generously funded and hard pushed by the globalists. But the point is that when people come to vote now, they're voting groups of people and races. They're voting for their own race. What are you going to do for my race of people? What are you going to give us? And that type of thing. And it's needless to say, it means that the policies and the solutions are so splintered now that they can't be universally applied. So, say in my case, when I vote or when I consider the political parties, I don't particularly think of what's in it for me. Now, there may be situations if policies that directly affected me, and say that I don't know, any white person has to pay an extra tax or something. Then I would say, well, hey, I don't want that. I'm going to vote for the party that says they're against that. Actually, I couldn't think of anything at the top of my head, but for me, the issues in an election are what will be in the common good, because if it benefits my next door neighbour and the guy down the road, then it benefits me by default. That could be things I want to know that there's going to be crackdown on corruption, for example. There's going to be clean and fair elections where every ballot is accurately counted and there's no mail-in ballots that mysteriously appear in large numbers or anything like that. I want to know that the courts, the judges are all independent. I want to know there's no activists being placed in the courts. I want to know that the rule of law is applied equally. I want to know that due legal process will apply at all times. I want to know that my rights are the same rights as the folks on the corner and folks up the road and so on. I want to know that the roads are being well maintained. I want to know that teachers are well qualified and very capable in teaching the children. I want to know that the universities are not hives of leftist activism and where they're rigorous. I want to know that there's affirmative action isn't destroying merit. I want to know that if you work hard and you live well, not necessarily frugally, but if you are careful with your money, that you can go and do well. I want to know that my children are going to do very least as well as I did, hopefully better. Those are the things that I'm sort of looking at when I look at policies. But it made, just recently I've realised that outside of the white sort of middle class community, very few people, certainly none of the migrants that I'm aware of, and none of their representatives that are squawking all over the media all the time, that none of them think that way. What's the fuck, what's fucking in it for me? That's in my tribe. That's all they think about. They don't care. And if it means that they're taking stuff from another tribe, then they're fine with that. They're totally okay with that, which is very much that Indian sort of, as an example, the Indian mentality, or a lot of the mentality of a lot of people from other places where they look at where they look at the wealth as a fixed amount. It's not a something that can be created. Wealth is a fixed amount, and the way you get more is taking it from the other guy. That's how you get more. And so these people come to this country with that mentality, and even people who are born here have that same mentality. So they're constantly pushing for their own tribe. Now, in Australia, there you've got close to just shy of 40% of the voting population who are now non-Anglo-Saxon, non-white, and they're split across multiple tribes and races, and they're all arguing for their own tribe. Now you'll get some outliers, sure, that'll sort of see the common good, but wow, if there's hardly any, they're all arguing vociferously and aggressively arguing just for their tribe. So the amount of people that are prepared to look at policies and think of the common good outside of the white population is close to zero. So at that point, democracy ceases to exist. I mean, all these people are corrupt. They all think corruption is how you get things done. Why bother working hard and offering the best product or service or this or that, or achieving anything on merit? Just bribe the living shit out of somebody and get it that way. It's efficient, it's clean, it's quick, and it's certain. There's all sorts of uncertainty when you sit for a merit-based exam, for example. Who's going to come first? Who's going to come last? Will your tribe have more people coming first? All these sorts of things. That's uncertainty, and they don't want it. The globalists, of course, pander heavily, very heavily to these sorts of things. We also saw this sort of say in the United States, the behavior of even 200, 300, 400 even years on from coming from Africa, the integration of black people into white society was almost zero. Many of them still have exactly the same attitudes as they would as if they'd come off the boat from Africa the day before. How they could have such continuity, as a group of people within the white society means they've sort of stuck together in enclaves and haven't gone outside of that. And a very small number have actually integrated into what you would call white attitudes and white society. Thus, they've become a special interest group. And look at the disruption that's causing today in the United States, exploited hugely, of course, by the globalists. But it goes to illustrate, if you don't have homogeneity, and you can have different ideas and attitudes, but the either two of the three have to be homogenous, either racially homogenous, behaviorally homogenous, spiritually homogenous, as in you worship or how you worship, that sort of thing. Now, if you can get any two of those three, you typically can make it work. 3 out of 3 is far more desirable, but and you may have disagreements. We look at the huge disagreements that used to go on in the political parties in the late 1800s in the United States. In fact, all over the Western world, the different political parties had sometimes radically different prescriptions and policies as to how they could address social ills and how to improve society, make people's lives better, and so on. Radically different views on how to get there, but they all agreed on the same. All the problems, all the challenges were pretty much the same. And today it's very different. Everyone's looking for an aggrieved Shaniqua, and that becomes then the personal pain story, becomes then the issue, and the politicians jump all over it, again encouraged by the globalists and the propagandists. So if democracy is to survive in a corruption-free society, and rule of law, geolegal process, all of that's to survive, then we have to address this right now. It's going to be too late, I think, in 10 or 15 years. Because once all these multicultural groups have arrived and whites are in the minority, there won't be enough people around who want to change it. They'll all be trying to desperately grab what they can from the trough. And if it means other people miss out, who gives a fuck? And that'll be their attitude. So I look forward to your comments below. Can democracy survive in a multicultural environment, particularly the one we have now, forced upon us by the globalists? And I look forward to reading those comments. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.